My name's Wesley, I'm 38, and I've never been the kind of guy who asks for much. I don't like drama, I'm not big on attention, and I've never tried to outshine anyone in my family, even when I could have. I've always believed that people should be able to show up for each other without being begged to. That's probably why this whole thing still stings, even now, weeks later. I used to think that if you gave love, you'd get it back eventually. Turns out, that's not always how it works, especially with family. I come from what people on the outside would probably call a big, tight-knit family. At least that's how my mom likes to present us to the world. Holiday Facebook photos with matching outfits, choreographed birthday toasts, and those nauseating group texts with heart emojis that no one really reads. I have two older brothers, Greg and Malcolm, and a younger sister, Jessica. My parents are still together, still living in the same two-story house we all grew up in. From the outside looking in, you'd think we were the kind of family that had each other's backs no matter what. But I learned pretty early on that I was the spare wheel in the group. The quiet one. The different one. While my siblings played sports and followed each other into the same social circles, I was the kid who liked to draw comic books in the basement and collect antique keys. Seriously, I had this weird thing with old keys. I liked imagining what they opened. My brothers mock me for it endlessly. Greg once told me, deadpan, "If you're gonna be weird, at least be useful about it." I was 13. I eventually grew into myself. Got a job in graphic design straight out of college, started freelancing, and later opened a small creative agency with a couple of friends. We did branding work, web design, product visuals, stuff people said wasn't real work at family dinners. I didn't mind. I had a good life, a decent apartment, and most importantly, my son. My son's name is Tyler. He's turning 9. Brightest kid I've ever met, and I don't just say that because I'm his dad. He's got this way of thinking, like he sees the world just a few steps ahead of everyone else. And he's funny, dry humor, weirdly observant, always catching things that fly over other kids' heads. He's my best friend, and I don't mean that in a cringy way. I mean that when I think about who I want to spend a Sunday afternoon with, playing old Super Nintendo games or walking through the park with hot chocolate, it's him. Always. Tyler's mom, Lena, and I split up about 5 years ago. It wasn't ugly, just two people growing in different directions. We've managed to stay civil, even friendly, for Tyler's sake. She's got her own life now, and we've both made it work with joint custody. I've always taken pride in making our time special. Every other weekend, I pick him up on Friday, and it's just us, building pillow forts, watching documentaries about space, trying new weird ice cream flavors. It's our thing. So when his birthday came around this year, I wanted to do something a little extra. Not extravagant, just thoughtful. I rented out this cozy little restaurant he loves, a family-owned Italian place with red checkered tablecloths and a jukebox in the corner. They do make your own pizza nights for kids, and the owner, Frankie, treats Tyler like he's royalty every time we come in. I reserved the whole place, paid in advance, even made custom menu cards with a drawing of Tyler as a superhero, Captain Extra Cheese. I printed them myself on glossy cardstock. Silly, maybe, but it meant something to me. I sent out invites to the whole family 2 weeks in advance. Texted, emailed, made a group chat. I even reminded everyone the day before. No one said they couldn't make it. Not a single one. Tyler and I showed up that Saturday in our matching navy shirts. He had a little bow tie he picked out himself. I had balloons in the car. The table was set for 16 people. I remember looking at all the empty chairs, my stomach doing this slow, painful twist. Frankie gave me a sympathetic look from the counter. I kept glancing at the door, trying not to let Tyler see the worry on my face. He was still excited, bouncing in his seat, asking if he could pick the first song on the jukebox. "Do you think Aunt Jess will bring that chocolate cake again?" he asked, eyes lit up. I nodded. "Yeah, bud. I bet she will." We waited 15 minutes. Then 20. I texted the group. "Hey, we're here." Tyler's excited to see everyone, smiley face. Nothing. Not a single reply. 35 minutes in, Frankie came over and gently asked if I wanted him to start serving the food. I told him to go ahead. We ate alone. Just me and my kid. He didn't ask again about the others. Just quietly made his pizza and started humming along to the song he'd picked. I smiled, told stories, laughed too loud at his jokes. But inside, I was unraveling. When we got back to the apartment that night, Tyler fell asleep on the couch with frosting on his cheek. I sat next to him in the dark, scrolling through the family group chat. Still no messages. No sorry, I forgot. No running late. Not even a single emoji. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned off my phone. A week went by. Silence. No calls, no apologies, nothing. I didn't bring it up, didn't ask for explanations. I figured maybe they were embarrassed. Or maybe they just didn't care as much as I did. Either way, I let it sit. I took Tyler to the arcade the next weekend and didn't bring it up once. But then, exactly 7 days later, I got a text from Greg. Hey, booked your place for Jake's rehearsal dinner, $150 a head. See you Saturday. Jake is Greg's oldest. 23, engaged to a girl I've met twice. They're doing this rustic barn wedding thing next month. I'm not close with them, but I was invited out of courtesy. I hadn't RSVP'd yet. And apparently, Greg just assumed my agency's studio space, the one we rent out for private events sometimes, was his to use. Without asking, no, would you mind? No, are you available? Just a statement. Like it was a done deal. I stared at that message for a good 5 minutes. I could feel something shift in me, like the quiet part of me, the one that always tried to be understanding, to play peacemaker, just stood up and walked out of the room. I didn't even think. I just typed back, reservations canceled. 20 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. Greg, then again, then Jess, then my mom. Call after call. Texts started rolling in. What's going on? You can't just cancel. People are flying in. You're being dramatic. I didn't answer. I didn't even read half of them. I was sitting on the couch with Tyler, watching a movie he'd picked out, some animated thing with a robot and a girl in space. He leaned against me halfway through, warm and content, and I thought, this is the only person who shows up for me every time. The only one who doesn't need a reminder to care. So I silenced my phone, let it buzz and buzz until it stopped. But the fallout was just beginning, and I had no idea how far they were willing to go to make me the villain in this story. I wish I could say the text stopped after that night. That maybe they'd taken the hint. But if you've ever dealt with people like this, family members who treat you like a utility instead of a human being, you know it's never that simple. The next morning, my sister Jessica sent a group message to the family chat. It wasn't even addressed to me directly, but it was obviously about me. Hey everyone, slight hiccup with the rehearsal dinner plans. Wesley had to cancel last minute due to a scheduling issue, but don't worry. Greg and I are figuring out an alternative. No apology. No explanation. Just enough passive aggression to make it sound like I'd flaked on them. Like I was the one who dropped the ball. I didn't respond. Part of me wanted to say something, to call out how wildly out of touch that message was. But the bigger part of me was just tired. I'd spent so many years making excuses for them, brushing things off, pretending it didn't bother me. But it did. It really did. That night at the restaurant had been the final straw. I just didn't realize it yet. A few days passed. I tried to keep my head down and focus on work. Tyler was with Lena for the week, and I threw myself into a new client project, branding for a local bookstore opening downtown. It was nice, actually. Peaceful. But by Thursday, I noticed something strange. Our event booking calendar had an odd new entry. Jacob rehearsal dinner, confirmed. Scheduled for Saturday. At my studio. I blinked at it. I knew I hadn't put it there. I asked my assistant, Mari, if she'd added it. She hadn't. I pulled the back-end activity logs. Someone had used our public event inquiry form, then responded to the automated confirmation email and marked it confirmed. It shouldn't have been enough to actually lock in the date, but somehow it had slipped through. That someone, Greg's fiancée, Rebecca. I stared at her email address in disbelief. I hadn't even remembered her last name until I saw it there. It felt entitled, brazen, like they'd already decided this was going to happen whether I agreed or not. I emailed her back, politely but firmly explaining that the venue was not available and that the booking was canceled. I CC'd Greg, just in case. The reply came within 10 minutes. Hi Wesley. Sorry for the confusion. I thought Greg had spoken to you already. We've already sent the invites with your address listed, and guests are expecting to be there. It would be incredibly difficult to change plans at this point. Hope you understand. The audacity. They hadn't spoken to me. They hadn't even asked. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to Mari and told her to block the calendar for maintenance that weekend. Then I turned off my notifications. But that didn't stop them. That Friday night, Greg showed up at my apartment. I opened the door, surprised to see him on my doorstep. He looked annoyed, not angry, not emotional, just inconvenienced. like I'd messed up a lunch order. You serious, Wes? He said, not even a hello. You're really gonna pull this crap? After everything. I blinked at him. Everything. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited. Walked right past me like he owned the place. We have 50 people coming tomorrow. Rebecca's parents are flying in from Vermont. We told them you were letting us use your place. We already paid for catering. I closed the door slowly. That's not my problem, Greg. You didn't ask. You just assumed. He turned around, finally facing me. You're part of this family, aren't you? I laughed, sharp and bitter. Funny. No one seemed to remember that when I sat alone with Tyler at his birthday dinner. He rolled his eyes. Don't start with that. No, let's do start with that, I said louder now. Not one of you showed. Not one text. Not one call. I decorated that place for hours, Greg. Tyler kept asking when everyone was gonna arrive. You know what I told him? That maybe you were stuck in traffic. That maybe Aunt Jess was baking a cake. That maybe, just maybe, someone gave a... Stop being so dramatic, he interrupted. You should have known we had Jake's engagement party that night. I stared at him. I did not know that. Well, Mom said she told you. She didn't. My voice dropped. And even if she had, how does a 9-year-old's birthday take a backseat to a party for a couple of adults who live 2 hours away and see you every weekend? Greg didn't answer. He looked uncomfortable for the first time, shifting his weight, glancing toward the hallway. I kept going. You all ditched him, Greg. A little boy. Your nephew. And now, a week later, you're asking me to open up my business like nothing happened? He sighed. Look, I'm not here to fight. I'm just asking you to do the decent thing. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. No, I said, stepping closer. Doing the decent thing would have been showing up when it mattered. This is you trying to save face in front of Rebecca's parents. We stared at each other for a moment. Then he scoffed. You've always had this victim complex. That one landed harder than I expected. Victim complex. Like the years of being excluded were just in my head. Like sitting alone in hospital waiting rooms while everyone visited each other was just coincidence. Like I hadn't watched him hand off Christmas gifts to my son without even remembering what grade he was in. I think you should go, I said quietly. He didn't argue. Just walked past me again, opened the door, and muttered, Don't be surprised if this blows back on you. And just like that, he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, lights off, TV on mute, scrolling through old pictures of Tyler's birthday party from last year. The one where everyone had come. When my mom brought that lopsided carrot cake, and Greg gave Tyler a drone he later borrowed and never returned. I wondered what changed. Or maybe nothing had. Maybe I was just finally seeing it clearly. The next morning, I got an email from Rebecca. Hey Wesley, so sorry to hear you're still feeling upset. We've decided to go ahead with the dinner at your place since everything is already arranged and paid for. Hope you can make it. Attached was a flyer. An actual, designed flyer, with my business address on it. A cute little graphic of clinking champagne glasses. Join us for Jake and Rebecca's rehearsal dinner. Hosted at the W Studios Event Lounge. My logo was on it. That was it. That was the moment. I don't know how to describe what I felt. Not rage, exactly. Not sadness. It was like a cold clarity settled over everything. Like I'd been gaslit into believing I was part of a family that would never really see me unless I was useful. And the worst part? I'd let them. I picked up my phone and texted Jessica. Did you know they're using my studio tomorrow without permission? She read it. Didn't reply. Then I texted my mom. I hope you understand how painful it was when no one came for Tyler's birthday. No response. So I made a decision. I drove to the studio. It was quiet. Mari had already placed a closed for private maintenance sign on the door. I double-checked all the doors and windows. Then I unplugged the lights, locked the cabinets, and left the key with our building manager with strict instructions not to hand it out under any circumstances. Then I called Frankie, the owner of that little Italian restaurant. I asked him a favor. And that Saturday, while my phone blew up again, I took Tyler to the movies. We watched a double feature. Ate too much popcorn. Took silly selfies in the photo booth. When he asked about the noise on my phone, I just smiled and said, Some people don't like when you say no. He nodded solemnly, like he understood more than I gave him credit for. When we came home, there were 8 missed calls, a dozen texts, 1 voicemail from my mother, all of them variations of the same theme. Why are you doing this? You're being selfish. You're ruining Jake's big day. But I didn't feel selfish. For once, I felt like I was standing up. Not just for myself, but for Tyler. For every quiet moment I let slide. For every time they'd looked right through me. I thought maybe they'd back off after that. I was wrong. Because Monday morning, I walked into the studio to find something waiting for me that would change everything. A letter. Official. Typed. On Greg's company letterhead. It wasn't an apology. It was a bill. And not just a casual request either. A formal invoice claiming damages for a last-minute cancellation, loss of deposit, and emotional distress. Total amount due? $3,600. And right there in the notes section, we expect family to honor commitments. I sat down, the paper trembling in my hands. That was the breaking point. Because now it wasn't just disrespect. It was war. I wish I could say I ripped that letter in half right then and there, that I marched into Greg's office and gave him a piece of my mind, or that I called my mom and asked her what was going on. But I didn't do any of that. I just sat there, staring at that ridiculous invoice, my pulse in my ears, and something tight pressing behind my eyes. $3,600. That was rent on my studio. 3 months of groceries. A weekend trip with Tyler. It wasn't the money that got to me. It was what it meant. After everything, after being ignored, after being used, after watching my kid get stood up by his own flesh and blood, they still thought they could twist the knife and smile while doing it. I set the paper down gently on my desk and left the office. I told Mari I wasn't feeling well. She didn't ask questions, just gave me a concerned look as I walked out the door and into the street like I was sleepwalking. I ended up in the old park a few blocks away, the one with the duck pond and the broken fountain that hadn't worked in years. I sat on a bench near the water and just breathed, watched 2 toddlers chase each other with sticks while their moms talked about summer camp. I must have looked like a ghost, hood up, shoulders hunched, fingers twitching like I didn't know what to do with them. How did it get this bad? I wasn't new to being overlooked, but this was something else. The quiet exclusion I'd grown up with had always been painful, but subtle, easy to rationalize. They forgot to invite me. They didn't mean it. It wasn't personal. But this? A bill? For not letting them use my business like a free banquet hall. It was like someone had ripped the blinders off and shoved me into the cold. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat the next day. I kept going through the motions at work, client calls, design drafts, status meetings, but I was hollow. Like someone had scooped out my insides and left a shell behind. And then one night, about a week after the letter, I went to pick up Tyler from Lena's. He opened the door grinning, already halfway into a story about a science project he'd started. And we're using vinegar and baking soda to launch this little paper rocket, and it goes so high. Dad, you should have seen it. Like, boom, straight into the ceiling tiles. I smiled, tried to keep it together, but Lena caught it. She always had a way of reading me when I least wanted her to. After Tyler ran to grab his backpack, she lingered by the door. You okay? She asked softly. Yeah, I lied. She didn't blink. You look tired. I laughed under my breath. That obvious? Only to someone who used to fall asleep next to you after 16-hour shifts. I rubbed the back of my neck. It's just family stuff. Her face shifted. The birthday thing. I nodded. She hesitated, then stepped out onto the porch with me. Tyler didn't say anything, but I could tell. He was quiet that Sunday. Just said he had fun with you and the pizza was good. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Lena's voice dropped to a whisper. Wes, I know you don't want to hear this, but maybe it's time to stop letting them have so much power over you. I looked at her. You've spent years trying to prove your worth to people who don't even bother to RSVP to your son's birthday, she said. You don't owe them anything, least of all your peace. I didn't say anything, just nodded, because if I opened my mouth, something in me might crack. But her words stayed with me that night, echoed louder than I wanted them to. You don't owe them anything. That's when things began to shift. Not all at once. There wasn't some dramatic movie montage of me rebuilding my life. But something inside me, quiet and steady, began to change. I stopped answering the group texts. I muted the thread completely. I told Mari to block any booking inquiries that came from family emails unless I explicitly approved them. I started setting firmer boundaries, little ones at first. Saying no when someone expected a favor. Declining invitations to family brunches, where I'd spend half the time explaining why I was still single and the other half listening to Greg talk about crypto. At first, it felt wrong, like I was doing something selfish. But then, slowly, it started to feel like something else. Liberating. Freeing. like I was peeling off a heavy coat I didn't know I'd been wearing for years. One night, after Tyler fell asleep on the couch next to me, I pulled out my old sketchbook, the one I hadn't touched since college. I used to draw all the time, little fantasy creatures, detailed cityscapes, superhero concepts I dreamed of pitching one day. Life got in the way. Deadlines, meetings, clients. But that night, I sat at my desk, turned on the lamp, and let my pencil wander. Hours passed. The world disappeared. And when I looked up, it was nearly 2 a.m., and I'd filled 5 pages. I started drawing again every night after Tyler went to bed. Not for work. Not for anyone else. Just for me. And something strange started happening. I felt lighter. Sharper. Like some part of my brain had finally been unclogged. I'd wake up with ideas buzzing in my head. Mari noticed it too. "You're in a good mood this week," she said one morning. "You invent a new type of coffee or something?" I laughed. Something like that. Then, a month after the bill, something wild happened. I posted one of my superhero designs, just for fun, on an old Reddit account I hadn't used in years. A sketch of a character Tyler had come up with. Captain Marvel, the kid with kinetic powers and a pet pigeon sidekick. I added a little caption. "My 9-year-old superhero idea." I had to draw it. Let me know what you think. I went to bed. Woke up the next morning to over 7,000 upvotes. Hundreds of comments. People asking for more. One guy asked if I had a Patreon. Another said he worked at a small indie publisher and wanted to talk about character development. I blinked at the screen, heart thudding. This wasn't a fluke. Over the next few weeks, I kept posting. One drawing turned into a mini comic. I started sharing sketches on Instagram. Then someone tagged me in a story, said their son printed out my drawing and hung it in his room. That's when I realized I'd been starving for this. Not the likes, not the attention, but the connection. The feeling that something I made mattered to someone. Greg and the others still loomed in the background. Every once in a while, I'd get a text. A vague apology. A half-hearted attempt to grab coffee. I ignored most of them. And then one day, Tyler brought home a family tree assignment from school. We sat at the table, crayons scattered everywhere, drawing little portraits of everyone. "Should I put Uncle Greg?" he asked, coloring in his grandma. I paused, then said, "Only if you want to." He looked at the paper for a long moment. Then he smiled and started drawing our cat in that spot instead. "Captain Marvel needs a feline sidekick," he said. And I knew I was doing something right. But even as things started to rise, my art, my confidence, my relationship with Tyler, something was still brewing behind the scenes. I found out from Mari that Greg had gone to one of our suppliers behind my back, tried to undercut our printing costs for his new entrepreneurial venture. When they refused and told me, I wasn't surprised. I heard through my cousin that my mother was telling people I'd distanced myself because I was bitter about not being as successful as my brothers. And then, just when I thought they'd finally let it go, I got another letter in the mail. This one wasn't a bill. It was a formal notice of small claims court. Greg was suing me. The charge? Breach of verbal contract. The date? 3 weeks from that day. I read the paper once. Twice. Then I set it down, picked up my pencil, and sketched something I hadn't in a long time. A door. And a key. Because I'd finally found what it opened. And I wasn't going back. Not now. Not ever. But if Greg wanted a fight, well, I had just the plan. When I first read the court summons, my hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just sat there at the kitchen table, the letter in one hand, a half-eaten piece of toast in the other, and let the absurdity of it wash over me. Greg, my own brother, was taking me to small claims court. Over a verbal agreement he fabricated out of thin air. Over a rehearsal dinner that never should have been my responsibility in the first place. Over me, finally saying no. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of scare tactic. A petty play to humiliate me. But then I read the details. He'd attached receipts from the caterer, florists, even a refund slip from some custom napkins printed with Jake and Rebecca. Love and Bloom. Yes, really. His filing claimed I'd guaranteed usage of the venue verbally, with witnesses present, and that my negligence had caused emotional distress and significant financial loss. And the witnesses? My mother and Jessica. It hit me like a sucker punch. That they were willing to go that far. Not just enabling him. Not just ignoring what he did to Tyler and me, but actively backing him. I sat at the table for over an hour, flipping that letter over in my hands, trying to understand how the people who were supposed to protect me had turned into people I needed protection from. But then, something clicked. Not rage. Not grief. Precision. I could feel a plan beginning to form. Not fully realized. Not even fleshed out. But the spark was there. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the family punching bag. I felt like a chess player with pieces finally in motion. And I wasn't going to let them make me the villain in my own story. First things first, I got a lawyer. Her name was Melina Ortiz, and she looked like the kind of person who'd survived 6 lifetimes in one. Sharp, unflinching, mid-50s with streaks of silver hair pulled into a clean bun. She'd worked on everything from corporate litigation to nasty family estate disputes, and she didn't blink once while reading Greg's complaint. "This isn't a case," she said, flipping to the second page. "It's a tantrum." I liked her immediately. Melina walked me through the basics. He's suing for under $10,000, so it falls under small claims. No jury. No formal discovery. But that doesn't mean you can't crush him. "Good," I said. "Because I don't want to just win. I want to end this." Her eyes twinkled. I spent the next 2 days combing through everything. Texts, emails, receipts, calendar logs, even Frankie's invoice from the restaurant I'd actually reserved for that weekend. Mari helped me collect studio records showing the space had been blocked off for maintenance well before the rehearsal dinner debacle. She even had security camera footage showing no one ever showed up that Saturday, except me and Tyler briefly to grab a tablet I left behind. I built a timeline. Layered, documented, airtight. I wasn't just defending myself. I was building a case that would expose everything. Every assumption, every entitled demand, every whispered lie. But that was only part of it. Because for once, I wasn't just playing defense. I was setting the board. See, Greg's entire life revolved around image. He worked in real estate, pompous luxury development stuff, Instagram drone videos of half-built condos, constant networking dinners, always trying to get investors to see him as a visionary. His latest pitch? A boutique property line called Nest Key Living, meant to blend modern minimalism with soul. Don't ask. And here's the thing. When you work in branding, like I do, you start to notice patterns. You know what makes a story stick. You know what tanks a reputation. So I started digging. Not illegally, just public records, social media breadcrumbs, old networking events. And slowly, I pieced together something interesting. Greg had filed to trademark Nest Key Living under his personal LLC. But the domain was registered by his business partner, a guy named Shane. The two had co-hosted a webinar a few months back pitching investors for an upcoming pilot property, a 6-unit eco-complex upstate. But on none of their promotional materials did it list Greg's involvement officially. He was trying to stay behind the scenes. Why? Because, as it turned out, Greg had defaulted on a private investor agreement 2 years earlier during a separate failed development. One that led to some pretty heated arbitration. It never made the news, but it spooked enough people that he was trying to rebuild under a new name, carefully distancing himself from any failed past ventures. That meant image was everything. Clean image. No mess. No drama. And now he was dragging me to court, publicly. I wasn't going to stop him. I was going to let him, and make sure everyone was watching. Melina and I discussed the details. In small claims, lawyers aren't required, but you're allowed to have one consult and prep you. I'd represent myself in court, but she'd help me draft my countersuit. Yes, countersuit. Because I'd incurred costs too, actual ones. Canceling the event space, rescheduling maintenance, hiring extra security after receiving threatening messages from Greg's friends. And emotional damages? No, I didn't go that far. I didn't need to. I had something better. Cold, verifiable facts, patterns of entitlement, and receipts. But I needed one final element. Witnesses. And not the kind who lived in my family group chat. I called Frankie, the restaurant owner. I explained everything, showed him Greg's original messages, and asked if he'd be willing to write a signed statement confirming that I'd reserved his venue for Tyler's birthday that same day, and that not a single family member had shown. He didn't hesitate. "I'll even show up in court if you need," he said. "I remember how your son kept looking at the door. Broke my damn heart." Then I reached out to Lena. I debated it for a while, unsure if it was fair to ask. But when I finally explained what was happening, she offered her help before I even got the words out. "Say the word," she said. I was there. I remember how quiet Tyler was after that weekend. Even Mari wanted in. She pulled records, print logs, timestamps, everything to prove that Greg's claims were fiction. I've watched you put up with them for years, she said. I've got your back, Wes. It felt surreal. For the first time in my life, people were standing with me. And I realized this wasn't just about winning in court. This was about showing Tyler what it looks like when you stop letting people walk over you. When you say enough. I booked a quiet meeting room for the day of the hearing and rehearsed every detail. Melina grilled me with mock questions. Lena played devil's advocate. Mari role-played as a snarky Greg. And the more we prepared, the calmer I felt. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I wasn't coming to that courtroom to shout or cry or demand an apology. I was coming to set the record straight. To stand in the middle of the mess Greg made and say no more. The hearing date crept closer. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't text Jessica. I didn't reach out to Greg. I didn't need to. Let them show up thinking I'd crumble under the pressure. Let them think I was the same pushover who used to sit quietly at Christmas while they laughed at my hobbies and handed my kid last-minute gift cards. I wasn't him anymore. I was the man who built something on his own, who raised a son who understood loyalty and kindness better than grown adults, who took rejection and turned it into something beautiful. I was ready. The day before the hearing, I walked into my studio and sat at the desk where I'd first read Greg's letter. And I pulled out my sketchbook. I flipped past pages of superheroes and pigeons, past doorways and keyholes, past fragments of a life I was finally reclaiming. And on a fresh page, I drew a courtroom. One chair was empty. The other? Occupied by someone holding a piece of paper. Not angry. Not afraid. Just prepared. Because tomorrow, Greg would walk into that courthouse expecting a fight. But he wouldn't realize. I'd already won. Courtrooms are never as dramatic in real life as they are in movies. No slamming gavels or shocked gasps from the gallery. Just a small, beige room with mismatched chairs, a clock that ticks too loudly, and a judge who looks like he's counting the minutes to lunch. But to me, it felt like the stage for the final act. The culmination of years of being overlooked, underestimated, used, all wrapped into this neat little room with flickering fluorescent lights and cheap carpeting. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a tailored navy jacket and gray slacks. Not to impress, but to look composed. Clean. Collected. I brought a single leather folder, no dramatics. Just facts. Mari walked me in, gave my shoulder a quick squeeze, and took a seat in the back. Lena was already there too, sitting with her arms crossed, and a look on her face that said she dared someone to test her patience. Then Greg walked in, flanked by my mother and Jessica. He wore his smugness like a tailored suit, all swagger and confidence. He shot me a glance like we were rivals in some business deal, not brothers. My mother avoided my eyes. Jessica gave me a tight, unreadable smile. We were called forward. I stated my name. Greg did the same, clearing his throat before answering, as if he were the one doing me a favor just by showing up. The judge, a wiry man with a sharp voice and no time for nonsense, glanced through the file. We're here on a claim of verbal agreement breach, initiated by the plaintiff. Mr. Wesley Morgan, you've filed a countersuit. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, I said, calm and clear. Let's begin. Greg wasted no time launching into his performance. He described the deal we'd supposedly made, that I'd offered my venue freely, that I'd confirmed it multiple times verbally, that I'd pulled the rug out the day before the event and caused irreparable harm to his and Rebecca's wedding process. I had guests flying in from out of state, Your Honor, he said, using that fake corporate tone he'd mastered. I lost money. My reputation as a professional was damaged, and I have witnesses who can confirm the agreement was in place. He gestured toward my mom and Jessica, who nodded solemnly, like this was some funeral for truth itself. Then it was my turn. I took my time, opened my folder, flipped to the first exhibit, an email printout. Your Honor, this is the only written communication referencing the use of my venue. It came from Rebecca, Greg's fiancée, after invitations had already been sent, assuming access to a space she had not secured. I never agreed to it. There is no signed contract, no message of consent, and no payment. I handed it to the clerk. Then came the reservation logs from my event calendar, showing that I had booked my studio for maintenance a full week before the rehearsal dinner was announced. Then Frankie's signed statement, confirming that I had, in fact, rented his restaurant for my son's birthday that same day, with no-shows from every invited family member. Then security footage, timestamped video of me and Tyler walking in and out of the studio that day, with no guests ever arriving for a dinner that never happened. The judge raised an eyebrow. Greg shifted in his seat. I have additional witnesses, if the court is willing, I said. Proceed, the judge said, gesturing. I turned to the back of the room. Mari walked up first. Clean, confident, professional. She described the studio's booking system, the calendar entries, the public-facing form, and how Greg had never gone through the proper process, just assumed ownership over the space. She even mentioned the messages we'd received from his friends, demanding we fix the cancellation or else, which had prompted us to hire security. Then Lena took the stand. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just calmly described how Tyler had waited for hours at his own birthday dinner, asking where everyone was. How he'd never received a phone call. How he'd gone to bed thinking he'd done something wrong. By the time she was done, I saw something crack in the judge's expression. I gave the final piece of evidence myself. My countersuit includes damages for misrepresentation, threats to my business reputation, and costs incurred from defending against a fabricated claim. My son's emotional pain is not something I can assign a dollar value to, Your Honor, but I'll settle for accountability. Silence. Greg looked pale. Jessica was staring down at her shoes. My mother's mouth was set in a tight line, as if she'd just realized this wasn't going the way they planned. The judge leaned back and spoke slowly. Based on the evidence provided, I find the plaintiff's claim to be without merit. There is no indication that a formal or even informal agreement was established. Mr. Morgan acted within his rights in denying access to his business. The plaintiff's assumption does not constitute a contract. Greg blinked. I also find sufficient basis for the defendant's countersuit. The behavior demonstrated by the plaintiff, including coercion, misrepresentation, and misuse of family influence to manipulate business property, has caused material and reputational harm. I award the defendant damages in the amount of $4,800. Greg's jaw dropped. My mother turned to him, whispering something frantic. Jessica just sat frozen. And, the judge added, I strongly advise the plaintiff to reconsider the use of personal vendettas as grounds for legal action. Court is adjourned. He banged the gavel once. Quick. Final. It was done. I stood up slowly, gathered my folder, nodded politely at the judge, then turned and walked out without looking at my brother. Outside, the sun was shining like it hadn't in weeks. Mari clapped me on the back. Lena hugged me. Tyler, who'd stayed home with one of Lena's friends, sent me a selfie holding a drawing he'd made of me in a cape with the caption, My dad beat the bad guys. Greg never apologized, but the fallout was fast. Word of the lawsuit spread. He'd told people in his network that he'd won before the hearing. So when news broke that he'd lost and had to pay damages, people started asking questions. One investor pulled out of Nest Key. Then another. Shane, his business partner, emailed me directly 2 weeks later. Short and blunt. Didn't know he tried to mess over his own brother. I'm out. The trademark? Greg lost the renewal window. I bought it for $8. My mother stopped calling. So did Jessica. I didn't chase them. I didn't block them either. I just let the silence do what it does best. But the best part? Tyler's next birthday. Same restaurant. Same pizza night. Except this time, I only invited people who'd earned it. Frankie brought out a cake shaped like a superhero mask. Mari showed up with a framed comic page I'd drawn of Captain Marvel saving the day. Lena brought matching capes for her and Tyler. Even Shane, the ex-business partner, stopped by and gave Tyler a remote control drone. We filled the room with laughter. Every seat was taken. Every smile was real. Tyler leaned into me at the end of the night and said, This was the best one yet. And I just smiled, because I knew the people who matter will always show up, and the ones who don't, they're not worth saving a seat for.